Recently, I went through a breakup. My old keyboard and I decided that we were not good for each other anymore. I was gonna work one day and I was like, yo, let's get this work done, bro. And the keyboard is like, nah, I have a new girlfriend now. So I had to go look for alternatives, and that's where this thing came up. If you haven't heard of this before, full disclosure, neither did I. But this is from a brand called EvoFox, which is apparently owned by a company called Amkette. I have heard of Amkette before and I have used some of their products. Like they make very good quality USB cables, so I know them from that. And this keyboard had its fair share of fans for having full RGB for under 1000 rupees and being like really good for gaming with low latency, anti-ghosting keys and a whole lot of other features. So I decided why not check it out for myself and see if it's actually worth kind of a flagship killer title that it has. Let's talk about the main thing about a keyboard, the typing experience. The keys don't feel as solid or robust that I thought they would, but they do have a springy feedback to them, so it's much better than your average membrane keyboard. You know those fixed membrane keyboards, the cheap ones that you get with your PC kit, which are around 250-300 rupees each. They don't usually have that good of a key press and they don't feel that well. Basically they feel like cheap trash. But thankfully, despite being cheap, this doesn't feel that way. The keys have a very good amount of travel to them and the springy feedback gives you a reassuring click every time you press a key. One of the main things that people encounter while using a new keyboard is the double clicking issue. Like when you press on one key and move to the next, sometimes that same key registers twice. That's not the case here. I never encountered any keys being pressed twice while I was typing a long document or anything on the web. I basically use my keyboards mostly for typing and I'm not much of a gamer myself. But since this has all this RGB goodness, I think it kind of meant to be gamed on. So yes, I took it for a spin. I installed my old favorite CSGO Global Offense game and I played it for a while. I'm very rusty in that game. Yeah, let's not talk about my gameplay skills, but the keyboard was excellent. The WASD keys and even the arrow keys when used were really responsive. There was no issue in that. I mean, not that I was expecting it to have any issues in the first place because it's a wired keyboard, so there won't be any latency with a USB connection. Speaking of that cable, this thing feels really solid, so this cable shouldn't break off anytime soon. As long as you don't travel with it a lot and you just keep it in a desktop setup, this thing should easily last you for years together. Now talking about the build quality itself, the keys and the keyboard are made of plastic obviously, but they don't really feel cheap. Like there's a decent amount of weight to them when you lift them up. That was the most surprising thing actually, because when this is a budget keyboard, I really wasn't expecting much from it. But when I first took it out of the box, the overall quality of it kind of impressed me. I thought they would cut corners in areas like the attachment of the cable and the overall feel of it in your hand. But no, EvoFox did deliver on this and I'm happy about that. However, there are a few issues I noticed. Main thing being that these feet, they don't have any rubber foot pad on them. So when you keep them down, as you can see, it moves around a little. So you need to have a desk pad with you, or a desk mat, I guess. Yeah, since you may have noticed this already, this is a short format keyboard and not a full format keyboard, meaning that it doesn't have a dedicated number key, which was exactly what I was going for. I don't really need a special number key on the side because all the numbers are here on top, and once I keep my hands on this typing row, I usually don't take it away, so it's good to have the numbers just here and not have additional space wasted on the right side for a dedicated number row. I'm not an accountant, so I don't type on numbers too much. And yeah, I've already mentioned how springy these buttons feel, so even though there isn't much heft to them, like when you're typing on them, you feel that the buttons don't have much weight, and they are very flimsy and like thin plastic made buttons, but they don't feel cheap, and definitely your fingers won't be fatigued when you're typing on this for a long time, so that's very good. I type on this for a very long time, as I mentioned, and this is pretty ideal for me. And coming to the mechanical sound, I know some of you are real big fans of that, so here, take a listen to how it sounds like. Well, hopefully that was up to your expectations. As you might have heard, it sounds a little shallower than a traditional mechanical keyboard, like it doesn't sound heavy with individual key presses, which I would have liked to see. But then again, keeping the budget in mind, I'm not really complaining. Okay, let's talk about the main selling point then. RGB. What is it like? It's like a budget keyboard. Let me just put it that way, because there is RGB, but there is just one mode, that is either it has to be fixed RGB, which just basically stays as it is, or you can press the function and this light button here to have it into a breathing mode, and that's it. There is no pulsing RGB modes, or individual buttons cannot be customized with the help of a software. I would have liked to see that, I guess. I mean, I was expecting at least 3 to 4 more RGB modes in the keyboard. I mean, it's not really hard, it's just a microcontroller in there controlling the lights, right? And speaking of the lights, I would have liked to see a little bit more density of lights in the keyboard. Like the extreme edges of the keyboard, they don't have a dedicated LED, meaning that the individual buttons don't have an LED under them. It's especially noticeable in the dark, where these RGB lights are a lot more prominent. I noticed that the light is only present under this left arrow key, so the right arrow and the downward arrow basically go dark, meaning that there is no light under there. So just one more LED under the right arrow key would have fixed this. This is the problem with the budget keyboard things. Like, they cut corners in every way to make sure that the price tag is low and to make sure they still make a profit out of it. Where the fuck? Speaking of cutting corners, this is just coming one after the other. The paint job on this keyboard is not that great. It kind of looks amateur. I especially noticed it below the spacebar area here. The spray paint which was given to the surface of the keyboard before installing the keys wasn't really done that well, in the sense it seeps into the areas which were meant for the keys. You can see that it's sprinkled all over the individual membrane for these keys, and it doesn't look that great because the RGB light makes it noticeable. If you switch off the RGB, sure, it's not noticeable at all. It looks like a very clean, high quality keyboard. But the moment you switch it on and even pay a little bit attention to how it's made, you will immediately come to know of all these tiny things. Now, I know it might sound like I'm nitpicking on these, but I'm really trying to appreciate this. But these minor misses in attention to detail really kind of ruin the experience. Thankfully, this is a keyboard and not a showpiece, so as long as it works fine while typing, I'm good with it, and you should be good with it as well. So that's it, the EvoFox FireBlade. Oh, one more thing. There is this feature which they advertise heavily on the box, saying there's a dedicated Windows lock button. Is that what they said? Hang on. Just some coffee. Anyway, on the box they say there's a Windows lock key, and they show this key in the picture. Now that leads me to believe that maybe there's a key to lock Windows operating system, but no, that's the key to lock the Windows, like from the Windows function to work. Like, this key will be locked when you're in a game. That's the meaning. Instead of saying Windows key lock, they could have said Windows key disable. So that would have made more sense to me, because when you're playing a game, you don't want to accidentally press the Windows key and be out of the game. So pressing function and Windows will lock the key, and now it will no longer work. Yeah, that led to a minor misunderstanding when I was first using it, but later it was cleared out to me. But overall, yeah, I'm relatively happy with the EvoFox FireBlade, or Amkette FireBlade, whatever you call it. It's a decent keyboard, but again, like I said in the title, it's not great. But that's not to say it's a bad keyboard either. Like, that wouldn't be fair. For someone who just wants a keyboard in a budget, who basically uses it as a keyboard itself without paying too much attention to aesthetics, they'll be perfectly fine with this. Now, on Amazon, this thing was going for $9.99, and funny story, I was just about to check out on $9.99 where I realized I gave a wrong address. I go back to change the address and suddenly it's now $8.99. So I just saved 100 rupees without even intending to save it. That's weird. But that goes to show that the prices on this thing are always changing. So I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check out the latest pricing or even buy this thing. Obviously, it's an affiliate link, full disclosure, I'll get a kickback from that, but it won't be much. Amazon doesn't pay a lot of like high affiliate rates. So don't worry, I'm not rolling in money here. Okay, that's been my short review of the EvoFox FireBlade. Let me know what you think. If you have any specific questions or anything else that you want me to check out of this keyboard, leave them in the comments down below. This has been a fairly interesting video to cover, because keyboards aren't really the ones that you upgrade more often, right? You just buy one and you keep it for a long time until it decides to betray you, and then you have to buy another. Anyway, hopefully you found this helpful to some degree. If you did, then consider subscribing, because I will produce more content like this as and when I get the time for it. I would ask you how you're doing with the quarantine, but at this point it's already been 3 months and I'm sure you're completely used to it and now you refuse to go to work. I'm not going to leave my house for at least until 2021, man. I'm staying right here. But with all seriousness, take very good care of yourselves. The situation is, it's not predictable outside, so yeah, hopefully we will get through this soon and become stronger. Alright then, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Haven't done this in a long while. Say what you will about caffeine, but coffee is great.